Welcome everyone to the Western Museum of Flight. I'm Cindy Maka, the director. With all of the security threats that our nation faces today, one of the most vital is the strategic threat of hostile submarines into our vulnerable waters. The most vital and active answer to the threat is helicopter, airborne, and submarine warfare. This requires special expertise, as practiced by today's speaker, Commander Jamie French. Jamie?
All right, thank you, Cindy. So good morning. My name is Commander Jamie French. I'm currently serving as the Executive Officer at Naval Weapons Station Seal Beach, and I am totally pumped to be here. This is super cool. So I will attempt to slow down because I tend to talk really fast. So if I'm talking too fast, please just give me the hand wave, okay? Okay, so Commander Jamie, my call sign is Curbie, which we can talk about afterwards. It does involve a very embarrassing story of me on my first TAD trip in the squadron and perhaps a vehicle. Okay. So a little bit about me. I actually grew up in Los Alamitos, so not too far from here. I graduated from Los Alamitos High in 1998, which is forever ago, I realize. So I was fortunate enough, if you would have asked me at that point in time what I wanted to do with my life, I would have told you I wanted to play volleyball in the Olympics, right? Okay, so I'm 5'6", probably not gonna happen, but I did happen to secure myself a spot at the Naval Academy. So I ended up going there. I went to prep school for a year and then went to Annapolis for 4, graduated with a degree in quantitative economics, and secured myself got just good enough grades to secure myself a flight billet out of there. So I went to flight school in Pensacola for 2 years and ended up with the helo slot, which I actually got a helo ride, when I was a midshipman out of Long Beach, and I was totally sold at that point that that's what I wanted to do. So I was fortunate enough to get that, and it was just an incredible experience. So graduated in 2003, went to flight school in Pensacola, then off to the fleet. So ended up in San Diego for probably the next 15 years, jumping from squadron to squadron, a different command, different ships as well. So I ended up moving back up here with the base executive officer position in Seal Beach, and I'm super pumped to be here. Okay, so we're going to talk, this is kind of an outline of what we're going to talk about today. So HSM, that's the community that, I was in. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the construct and then our major mission sets, and then we'll go into what systems support those mission sets. Okay, so 2 types of squadrons in the HSM community: helicopter strike, maritime strike. So 2 different types of squadrons. You have a carrier squadron, which has, this is the construct, so about 260 officers and enlisted. We split up between the carrier and the cruisers, destroyers, and LCS type ships. So you're gonna have 3 detachments from that, so that's your six aircraft, so 2 aircraft per cruiser, destroyer, LCS type ship, and then the other 5 stay on the carrier. And so you're all still one squadron deploying at the same time together, supporting the strike group. So second type of squadron is a expeditionary squadron. So not every air-capable ship is supported within the strike group from that helicopter, those 3 detachments. And so the other air-capable ships that the strike group needs are supported from those expeditionary type squadrons. So that's kind of where I grew up, was in the expeditionary world. And so if you want to talk about small boy, cruiser destroyer, frigate, LCS deployments, that's what I've done. I can talk ad nauseum about that. I've been on the carrier, I've landed on the carrier, but I can't talk so much about carrier life. So we divide that up, 11 aircrafts. So each of those 2 aircraft detachments, if you were watching the video earlier, you can kind of see what a tight fit it is on those destroyers and cruisers into the hangar. So it's a really small team. So on each of those air-capable ships, you get about 22, 23, maybe if you're lucky, 24 people. So that's your team to maintain those aircraft and get that mission done. So you get pretty tight-knit as a group. Okay, now we're into the mission sets. Okay, so 2 primary missions that we have, anti-surface warfare. So if you look on the image here, You can kind of see, so what we use for anti-surface warfare. On the nose, we have our MTS, or our infrared radar, but it does more than that, and I'll talk about that mission system a little bit later. But you can also see there's a radar dome for our APS 153. So we have a surface search radar, which is awesome. So it enables you to get the surface picture, and we can share that surface picture with the ship. You can share it on Link 16 with the other aircraft, so you can get out, identify all those contacts, figure out who's who in there, and who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. We have a capability for auxiliary fuel tanks there. That's that kind of like dome-looking thing right in the middle if you go straight down from the rotor. And on the left, you can see the Hellfire missile, which is also part of our anti-surface warfare platform, so we can carry 4 of those on the left-hand extended pylon. And then we also have some survivability equipment that we'll talk about. But the other unique thing about the MH-60 Romeo is our tail wheel. So if you look at it, it's straight up and down. Most Black Hawk type helicopters have that canted tail wheel because we are specifically shipboard that's designed to stroke to land on the ship. Okay, ASW, anti-submarine warfare. So major mission systems that support this are our dipping sonar. We call it an ALFS, or the dome is the other term we use for it. Super, super capable piece of equipment. And I guess we're going to talk a little bit more about capabilities there, but it's a very capable piece of equipment, served mostly for active type mission sets. And if you look on the right side of the image, you can see there's like a box that looks like there's a bunch of holes in it. So those are for sonobuoys. Well, there's room for 25 weight-wise. We can't take all 25, and so you have to make some trade-offs about what kind of mission you're doing and what you're looking at, what kind of problem you're looking at running. And so you can also see the ox tank on there, but I think that's about it for that mission set. Okay, secondary missions. So we are a helicopter, so we can still do search and rescue, medevac, and vertical replenishment, which is the image on the right. Naval surface fire support, basically providing targeting solutions for the ship, and communications relay. So we have a pretty robust comm suite on board that when we can extend the platform of other, basically extend the platform as they lily pad through us, essentially. Okay, so getting into our SUW mission, our APS 153 radar. So lots of different modes, and the software on this is pretty awesome. There's a lot of, you can get automatic target tracks if that's what you want. Your air crewmen and back, so I'll talk a little bit about our crew. So we generally fly with crew of 3. You have your pilot, co-pilot, and an AW in the back. And they run that entire picture. If you're lucky, you can get 2 AWs, but there's still only 1 console in the back. So you're not going to get 2 people running the problem set. You can have them working together to find that solution, but you still only have 1 console back there. Okay, so 7 different modes. Coastal really helps us with our basically depicting the coastline mission. Search short and search long are kind of your bread and butter out to sea. Gets you you can change the pulse length, sweep width, those kind of things to get into how, like, what works best for the environmentals that day and what you're looking for. If you're looking for a further out radius or you're looking for something that's closer in. Peri, short and long, that's specific software that's designed to help you find periscopes. So it's a software piece that changes the type of sweep width, again, pulse width, all that good stuff, to help you find those periscopes. ARPID is another periscope detect kind of software. And ISR, this is a really interesting capability that's part of our radar. And you have to have folks that are trained pretty well to it, because otherwise, and it's very aspect dependent. So you end up with this, if you look at that top image, that's ISR. And what you do is if you end up with the right aspect, you can get that beam aspect. What you'll do is you'll see this image kind of floating back and forth. But you can make out whether it's a combatant, whether it's a group 3, or if it's like a fishing boat or trawler from a really, really long way away. So it's pretty cool, but again, it's only as good as as the knowledge that you have, and as the aspect ratio as well. Because if you're taking a head-on aspect, you're not going to see a whole lot of the antennas and that nice picture you see on top. So frequency agile, which means we don't jam each other when we're out there, which is nice. Data fusion, so we have overlays on in our displays. So you can start with the radar picture, and then you can overlay the other systems on top of it. And so it's super cool, and it's very helpful. The data fusion fuses all that data together, so you can kind of come up with one tactile, one picture that you have. IFF interrogation, which is awesome, so we know who's out there and who's flying, just kind of like a warm blanket. Okay, this is actually a super interesting system. So our 210, those square antennas on the nose of the helicopter, let me go back here. See those square antennas right in the front? You see the FLIR, which is the infrared radar right in the nose, and there's 2 square antennas below it. That is our ESM. So we have those 2 in the front, and there's 2 in the back as well. And so that's a passive emitter detection. So the folks up at Point Mugu build us libraries that we program into the helicopter. And so it allows us identification of who's out there, but it also allows us to localize those as well, depending on ratio. There's different ways you can do that. It'll automatically flag emitters of interest, so if you're looking for somebody in particular, it can flag them so it'll come up. And then it'll let you know if you're getting fired at as well, so your radar early warning, which is a good thing. Okay, our FLIR, our MTS, multi-system targeting system. Okay, so several different modes, and those modes overlay, which is also really, really cool. So day TV, low light TV, as well as your IR picture. So 3 different types of lasers. You have your bore-sighted laser, which is what you're going to use when you're firing. So you can use it for targeting solutions for somebody else. You can use it for yourself to target with. Your laser target marker, which is your second one, and then your eye-safe laser. It's gyro-stabilized, and it does have, we call it AVT, your automatic video tracker. It does have that. So, and it's a really awesome capability. What it allows you to do is kind of screen capture what you're looking at as long as it has a good heat signature. So if it has a good heat signature, it'll stay locked on and it'll slew the FLIR with it. Now that being said, if you don't have a good heat signature, depending on the aspects that you're looking at, it may not actually stay on what you're doing, and then you're manually slewing it. Okay, so this is some of the imagery you can see and what the different overlays that go with it. And so if for some reason, if your IR isn't working very well, you can use your day TV or your low light TV, or you can or the images can be overlaid on top of each other. That's just really helpful. Like I said, if one of those is not working real well, you can take that image off. Or if it gets really humid, that IR can be kind of tough because everything's around the same temperature, and so you don't have that temperature differential that you need, and everything can look a little muddy. Okay, getting into ASW. Okay, Sonobuoy capability. So like I said, we have 25 slots, but we don't have the weight to take all 25. The BT buoys, your biomathery data, so getting your sound velocity profile. DIFAR and DICAS are your 2 kind of bread and butter of your active and passive buoys. VLAD is just like it's a hydrophone chain, and the Airbach and chaff, those are all kind of different mission sets, but they can be launched out of that launcher. It's a pneumatic launcher, so it's got to be charged up before you go. You can't decide mid-flight that you're going to go and do this. You got to be charged up before you go. The launcher's got to be ready. But here's the super cool part. So we can process 8 buoys at a time. So, which is hugely, it's a big deal in that while we can process 8 buoys, we only have a crew of 3, right? And so really, if you're not going to be looking at all 8, so you're going to have to kind of trim that down. But the fact that we have that is a big deal. And so the information will come up to the helicopter, and that's where you start working that problem, that ASW problem. So the other half of the ASW problem, so we use most of the buoys for kind of your passive piece of the ASW problem. When you end up going active, The ALFS while ALFS does have some passive capability, we use it mostly for active. And so our most effective means is using 2 helicopters. If you were watching the video beforehand, you have 2 helicopters kind of leapfrogging. And so you have pretty dynamic maneuvers to get into your dip position. And so you get basically in your 70-foot hover and lower this down into the water. And we have in excess of 1,000 feet of cable. So if there's really deep oceans, we can still handle that. Continuous wave, whole bunch of waveforms that we can look at. And again, that's usually the AW and back that's kind of running that problem, picking what works the best. You're going to do your study ahead of time of what the water looks like. And you're also going to take your sound velocity profile at that point, and that will help you kind of determine how you're going to fight that problem and where you need to be looking. So varied pulse length, and we can kind of, it does have the ability to cancel out some ambient noise as well, because if there's a lot of other stuff around, it can be pretty noisy in the ocean, and so that helps kind of cancel some of that out. All right, our comm suite, like I mentioned before, pretty robust comm suite. Standard UHF, VHF, have quick, which is a frequency hopping, really great to have. SATCOM as well, but that does require to be used and trained on because it's not something that's intuitive to get into. Comm relay and direction finding, which is always great if the ship decides to turn off their TACAN, which does happen sometimes. Data link, so this is where it gets pretty neat in that we have the ability to connect with the ship. And so those smaller detachments that are on the cruisers, destroyers, and LCS type ships, you'll take a hard line from the ship, and everything that you see, the ship can also see. So, which is a great capability. So all of that FLIR video that you have, someone on the ship can see and the CO of the ship can see to validate if there's something that you need to do, any sort of escalation of force maneuvers that need to be done. And so they can see basically everything that you can see on that ship. It's a great capability. It's C-band and KU-band, the newer ships, the KU-band. And then dipping into Link 16. So Link 16 provides you that overall battle picture with the strike group. So we're Link 16 capable. A lot of times we do take over that mission when the rest of the strike group has done flying for the day. But what it does, it extends as far as the last platform and the farthest out platform, and it provides you an overall SA picture. So if something's already been identified, you're going to know that, and it's in there. But there's also other capabilities in there that are pretty cool. Text, you can take images and send them. So there's some really neat capabilities in there. And then we also have IFF. Again, we have an interrogator and a receiver. That's just the safety of flight stuff. An AIS receiver, which is also great when you're working with your ship and they're trying to tell you to go and identify a contact that may be a little further away, but if you have an AIS receiver, you know that, hey, it's this. If you click on it, you can see what contact it is. If it's like a Group 3 shipping, because all those guys have their own AIS, it's like IFF for the surface. And so it can keep you kind of focused on maybe a bigger mission set than going 30 miles out to go identify a Group 3 contact. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, the Hawk link, the data link to the ship. And what we can also do is we can work with the ship to run the ASW problem as well. And so if we want to give the ship control, we can give them ship control, and then they can also run the problem as well. Now, generally, us being helicopter pilots, we always think we're right, and so we don't really like to relinquish that control, but it is possible, and it is great to have like another set of eyes sometimes look at those problems with you. All right, our survivability, our aircraft survivability equipment. We have missile warning, which I talked about. The radar warning is what I talked about before, but we also have missile warning detectors. There's 4 of them. There's 2 in the front and 2 in the back. As well as laser detection that are part of that missile warning system. And now our countermeasure dispenser panel, which is your ALE 47. That is what you can set that depending on the threat environment that you're working in to go off automatically. Which is great for survivability equipment because it provides you a little bit extra time to react. Your IRCMs, that's IR countermeasures, basically masks our masks what our heat signature is, helps with that aspect of it. All right, weapons, the fun stuff. So we can take up to 4 Hellfire missiles or Mark 46, Mark 54 torpedoes, which are the new ones. And we can also mount a 50 cal in the door or an M240. Okay, so these are kind of just basic limitations: ship to shore, shore to ship, and this is just they're SOP type things that help keep us safe. Weatherman's standard 501, and then our fuel on deck is 600 pounds, and that's not all 60 variants have the same size fuel tanks, but our minimum fuel on deck is at 600 pounds. Okay. That's the end of this part. So I will open it up to questions. Okay, oh, sorry. He was asking about the 7 versions of IFF. And so we have our modes 1 through 5, and there's subsets in there. And so it's just a matter of, like, different aircraft have different types of IFF. And so you can tell by what they're squawking who they're working for. So not just the standard mode, Charlie. Yeah, go ahead. To the California coast, we've detected a hostile submarine. Unfortunately, we cannot talk about that today.
After this is over, I'll tell you a story about one off San Pedro.
Okay, yeah, I would love to hear it. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
All the weapons are carried on the left pylon?
The question was, are all the weapons carried on the left pylon? And they are, but the torps can be loaded up on both sides. The torps are on the inner, they're not on the left-hand extended pylon, they're on like an inner pylon. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. No, that's a surface one. Mm-hmm.
All electronics is really amazing. How far or long can you go on that 600 pounds of fuel?
So the question is, how far can we stay in flight on the 600 pounds? So that's our minimum fuel. That's just what we need to land with. And so we usually have about a 3.5 hour range. If you have an aux tank, it can extend, and also obviously depending on how you're flying, right? The type of airspeeds that you're flying, the type, because obviously if you're gonna burn more gas in a hover than you are at 60 knots up in the sky. So usually it's 3 to 3.5 hours. If you have an auxiliary fuel tank on, that can extend to 4:15-ish. So we have a decent on-station time. Yeah. At the helicopter. The question was, how do I like the flying qualities of the helicopter? So it's a super robust helo. We are a bit transmission limited because we're really heavy. So 23,000 pounds. And so we're very heavy. So we can be transmission limited in what we do. So you keep a very close eye on that generally when you fly. If you're generally not gonna, in my tenure with the Romeo, I haven't had engine issues. There's been like transmission stuff that goes on. It's just, and I think that's just a byproduct of the load of how heavy she is. Yeah, go ahead.
I presume you mentioned a number of weapon systems, I imagine, at a time.
So the question is, how many of the weapons can we load at a time? And so, it's, like you said, we are very weight dependent, and that is usually determined by the strike group. Depending on what the threat is. There's swing loads where you can see that you have Hellfire and an aux tank, and you may still have an ALFS, but it just depends on what the strike group needs and what the threat is at that point in time. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a two-part question. First is, what criteria?
So the question is, what would be the criteria to select the door gun, and then what's the threat that would warrant a door gun for ASW? Mm-hmm. So generally, we use door guns for kind of they're not used for ASW. So that would be an anti-surface mission that we would have, and so. A lot of times, generally, it's just a matter of what we need to shoot at that point in time for currency reasons. But it would just be threat dependent. Yes, sir?
If you detect
I, so the question is, if we detect a non-US submarine, what actions would we take? And so we're going to report that up our chain, and then chances are we're probably going to look back and see if we can get follow-on information. Yes, sir? Sorry, what? Yes, this is a Sikorsky SH-60, MH-60, which is just a mission suite thing. Yes, sir.
The SAR operation, do you take some of the ASW equipment out so that you have room for other stuff?
Great question. So the question is, when you do the SAR mission, do you take some of the ASW equipment out? So there's only so many ALFs per squadron, and so those, we can uninstall them and install them in the aircraft, but it's pretty laborious. To put it in, it takes about 4 hours. And there's lots of QA checks that go into that because it's a really delicate piece of equipment. So once they're in, we don't really like to take them out. And so what happens is you have generally a bird with an ALFS in it, and then you have a bird outfitted for your other missions. And so when we're doing a SAR mission, we're probably going to be using the other aircraft that has more space in it. Because like I said, that when you lose seats when you install that ALFS as well, because it's really quite large, and so you lose quite a bit of space, and there's not room for everything. So you're going to either have to take it out, or you're going to pick a different aircraft that's outfitted differently. Yes, sir, in the back.
I may have missed it in the beginning, but how many flight hours do you have?
I have about 2,000 hours. Yeah.
How often do you go out on an exercise?
So right now I'm at the weapons station, so I don't get any flight hours because I have to beg, borrow, and steal for them. Correct. Yeah, there's no squadrons, Navy squadrons here. Although they do sometimes land in LOSAL, but there's no supported squadrons here. But when those folks are in squadrons, so usually they go out. Those guys fly every day in San Diego. Yes, sir.
The sonar buoys
Yes.
you have on the helicopter, are those the same kind of sonar buoys as submarines?
So the question is, are the Sonobuoys the same ones that the P3s, P8s take? And they are. They're the same ones. The P8s have a much larger capacity, and so those guys can lay huge fields of buoys, of which we can tune up. So we can drop the ones, we can actually tune those, we can take their buoys and tune them up and get the same information that they have. They have a much larger crew to run that ASW problem, right? So we have our crew, but we can tune it, and they're the same exact buoys. Yes, sir.
What's survivability? Water rising, you folks have protection devices in there?
So when you fly, you have a LPU, and you fly with oxygen as well. So when you're required to do swims, we call them swims, it's your survivability training, every 3 years. And so what that does, I'm sorry, I didn't repeat the question. The question was, what kind of survivability equipment do we have for a water landing? And so we have our LPU, we have our oxygen, and so when you go through swims, they put you in this fun little chair. You can tell how much fun it is. This fun little chair, and they have a handle that like flips you over in the water. And so then you practice egressing. So you practice egressing the helicopter, like their underwater web. And then at the end of it, like the culmination of that training is like an actual like model of a helicopter that they put in a pool. And what they do is they drop it down. They put blackout goggles on you, have you wait. So you're supposed to wait until it sinks and turns over because the transmission's going to turn over. And then you hand over hand on the way out. So we train to it every 3 years. It's actually pretty good, but it also depends on the type of water landing that you're having. We had some folks that had a tail rotor cable that elongated, and they started losing tail rotor control right as they took off. All of those guys swam away. We lost the aircraft, but all of those guys survived. So it really does depend on the type of water landing that you're having. But I've also had friends that had controlled flight into terrain, into the water, and none of those folks walked away, right? It depends on the type of water landing that you have. No. No. They just go down, correct, yeah. And we have those discussions. So his follow-on question was, the aircraft doesn't have any flotation. And the answer is no. But we have those discussions when we're in our 70-foot hover about what we're going to do. So we have specific fuel requirements for when you go into a dip, and then how you're going to handle that. Are you going to be able to fly away, or are you going to end up settling into the water? So we have those discussions beforehand, before you even enter that phase of flight. You run through your checklist, and then you talk about how you're going to handle that emergency before it happens. And then you're going to monitor your fuel, because you have to be at below a specific fuel to even get into the dip. Yes, sir.
Are all your missions two ships going out on a mission?
The question is, are all our missions two aircraft missions? So no. In fact, if you're on a detachment, generally you're not going to fly both your aircraft. Now, that being said, the carrier squadrons, you can join up with your squadron mates and have and run those two aircraft missions, especially if you're running, like we call it like dip gang. If you're running an ASW out in front of the strike group, you generally do that with two aircraft.
And those two aircraft can have different equipment on different suites.
They're probably both going to be Alfsbergs. They're going to have an ASW suite. Yes, sir.
Okay, you promised the Curbie story.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay. For risk of undermining my authority here. Okay, so first TAD trip in Squadron, JG, brand new JG, went back to Pensacola. Sorry, the question was about my call sign. So went back to Pensacola. We have a rental minivan that I had managed to not be paying attention while I was driving and pop not only one tire, but two. So it was well earned. And obviously I have not lived it down since. Okay, all right, I'll take one last question. Actually, I haven't taken one from you. Yeah, yes, sir. And the Sierra? Yeah, so the question is, what's the difference between the Romeo and the Sierra? And there actually are quite a few differences. Again, that Sierra has that canted tail wheel, so airframe-wise, they're a little different. They also have a smaller fuel cell than we do, but that allows them to be lighter. And so because they take different mission sets from us, and so they take generally that combat search and rescue, as well as the VERT mission. And that's why they're a much more suitable platform, because they have that smaller fuel tank, and they're a much lighter aircraft because they don't have all those mission systems. And so we're kind of partitioned. While we can do a lot of those missions, to be frank, we're not quite as good at them as the CR community is. The question is, when we deploy on the carrier, do you have Sierras and Romeos both? And we do, yeah, to fulfill both sides of that. Okay, all right. Well, I just want to say thank you. I'll be here if anyone has follow-on questions. Thank you very much.